Welcome to my view from the piano bench. We do this on Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. here on my Joe Holt's Notes YouTube channel, in addition to Piano for My Friends on Thursday evenings. Thank you to all of you who support and encourage me via the links available on the support page of my website. You'll see a link to that page in the video description. Check out what's going on. And I think I'm keeping up with it. But it's good. It's fun. When you do this, you want to be busy. And then you regret that you're so busy because you can't attend to anything else. Such is the life of the one-man show, or one-person operation. Welcome to being an independent musician, which I wouldn't have any other way. Which I guess is a little bit related to the topic. In the last few weeks, for this particular series where I talk about things related to making music or my experiences and such, I've taken a few different tunes and just talk through them in terms of musical sensibility ideas that it provides for me, or opportunities to take little detours or talk about things. And a request came in to talk about my own background, in particular training, but more broadly as well, I think. And this person supposes what I might have studied and what I might have done and what I might have practiced, and it goes in the right direction, but maybe a slightly different emphasis. And so I'm going to try to be engaging with something I'm calling core sensibilities. And I'm going to talk about what has shaped what I do and how I approach it. And of course, those are my experiences and what I've learned and such. But talk about it also in terms of that we all have these sensibilities that inform us uniquely in what we do, based on, especially in something like the arts, where our heart takes us. So that's why I'm going to do this. And I don't have a detailed set of notes. I'm kind of going stream of consciousness like I have the last few weeks, and we'll see where that goes. I wrote myself some notes. I'm going to sit right down and write myself a note card and make believe it came from me. There we are. So what I'll always come back to as a bottom line about doing this, about playing music, and really I think this applies to anything, is you just got to live there. You live there for a long time. You live there in different applications. You live there by yourself and pondering and figuring out. You live there in community with other people. You know, the analogy I always come back to, and those of you who follow me have heard me say this 50 million times, but there may be 1 or 3 or 4 or 6 of you that haven't heard me say this, and this is important. When a toddler learns language, a young child, they don't learn it because they were taught formally at all. They learn it because they're hanging around people who are doing it. They spend their time around adults. They pick it up. And maybe they're encouraged to say certain things, but as they form their sentences, as they get past the first words, and as the speaking gets more mature, they're appropriating, without formal education, what is around them. And that means that you are going to absorb your environment, in particular if it's an environment that you've created because you're drawn to it. And that's a distinction with the toddler. The toddler is just there, but it's all wired to happen. So it's as it should be. And some of us just absorb the culture that we're in. Some of us, like myself, find alternative musical cultures. And those of us who do that maybe are slightly even more invested, or maybe even a lot more invested, because we discovered this thing that just really attracts us and brings us in, and we live there and we live there and we live there. And that's how it works. And you know my story, right? That I was like 12 or 13 years old and listening to this radio station, this AM radio station. This would have been in the 70s, early 70s, on Sunday nights when I could barely get, but I could get some nights better than others. And they were playing what we don't call now, but they called then Dixieland Jazz. But I didn't know that. They never actually said the word. They just said the people, Bob Crosby or whatever names they said. And I had no other exposure to it. Now, of course, in my piano lessons and such, I was being exposed to older tunes. I had an aunt who liked to sing like songs from the 1890s. And I remember, this just comes to my memory. I haven't thought about this for many years. Here we go. Wow. I haven't played that tune maybe since I was 12 or something like that. And I remembered it except for the end. I think I screwed up a couple of notes. But my Aunt Hester would sing that song, and I would accompany her. To the extent I could. I had the sheet music of songs from the gay 90s. Memories, memories, dreams of love so true, or the sea of memories, I'm drifting back to you, or something like that. Wow. So those things in our history, in our path, in our circle, are going to be experiences that we draw from, even if those aren't the things we choose or go to. But I had that older stuff already, and I remember having a book of songs from the gay 90s, roaring 20s, all of the above, Right? That song has its own significance, which I may or may not talk about. So those things were there, and then I discovered this radio station, and then I finally figured out it was Dixieland Jazz because they used the term, and I ran to 7-Eleven up the street who had a record display, and I saw Dukes of Dixieland, and that's all I needed to know, and that was my first LP. Though after buying, that may not have been my first LP, I'm not sure, because I had 45s of Paul Simon and Bachman Turner Overdrive and things that like in early 70s that kids my age would have listened to. And then as soon as I discovered the jazz, basically, all that was in my rearview mirror. So my heart guided me. But as my heart guided me, I was living there. I had no help in learning improvisation, but I did a lot of listening and eventually playing with people and figured things out slowly and clunkily. And I'm still figuring things out. And along the way, later on, I did get some help. But all this against a background of all of my lessons up until my 20s, with one 1-hour lesson exception when I was maybe 19 or 20, all of it being classical. None of it until college, high-powered, but I had these songs that I still struggle to play now. I played when I was 12 and 13, whatever, 10 or 11 or 14 or 9, I don't know. So, yeah. So those things were happening. I was, and the instruction helped me to read music. It gave my ears things to listen to, which is actually really important and something I can say that if you play music, and I'm sure this applies in the appropriate way to whatever subject we're talking about, but in terms of music, when you play music, you're not doing data entry. You're not programming a computer. You're not pressing buttons. And some people approach it that way. You are connecting with this, and you are becoming one with it. Now, this works differently in different applications. This is arts. This is, it's a unique thing. But you're listening to it, and that's really what I wanted to say. You're engaged. Engagement. That's the word. And if I'm playing, a song, right? And I've read it from sheet music, which I remember the music, and it might have been that key. It's either probably that key, which was F, or it could have been E flat. Right? But when you read it, you're not just like, putting a puzzle together. You're actually like listening, you're engaged with it. Right? And that's a big part of my learning, and hopefully all of our learnings, that we're immersed and we're engaged. Now, just that little section right there. And I don't remember exactly how I framed things, but when we talked about the song a few weeks ago, Nice Work If You Can Get It, and there was this movement of chords, very similar thing here. So you play that song enough, and you start to think, wait a minute, you're hearing something, right? And it's inside, which happens to be, and here I get in trouble when I say circle of fifth, no matter which way you go, but it's a circle of fourths and fifths, and it's root movement in fourths. And I never considered that this song might have been part of my discovery on my own of secondary dominance when I was 10 years old. But now I'm not getting ahead of myself. I'm just, bleeding into other lanes of traffic, but that's what I do. So let's take that old, old time jazz is what I used to call it before I had the word Dixieland. That sensibility, and let's play a tune. Let me see. What kind of tune when I play? I know, this is a fun tune. for what it's worth. That's a cute tune. That tune came to mind actually because it came up on a gig the other night. I don't know if that particular tune was, ever one of the songs I listened to on the radio, but it's all of that era that drew me in. So I had all of that just free floaty experiential thing, while my beginner teacher was all full of the traditional exercise books, the Hannon and the Czerny in particular, and there were some other things. And he was very specific. He was, I forget what he was, a pipe worker or something. He was 78 years old when he started coming to my house in his little red Mustang. And, I was 7 years old, which is once we were settled in New Jersey, because I was a military brat, we moved all over the place. And all I had ever done was just make music on toy instruments. And then my dad succumbed after we settled in New Jersey and bought the spinet piano from the neighbor across the street, wheeled it across the street, and then looked in the classified ads in the paper and got a piano teacher and got Mr. Schmidt. And a kind of stern, strict German man, but he took a liking to me and recognized, that there was something going on. And I was kind of a little bratty kid. And looking back, and I discovered some of this along the way, it was not by no means a complete education. He did not like Bach, which is really weird, but not. He was a romantic, and he pushed me in that direction. But there was just a lot in the training that was, it wasn't completely comprehensive. He got me playing, pieces in Chopin and things like that. We worked up to that from the beginner level. And I'm going to tell you that I very minimally practice the repetitive things. Probably, the scales is, and not, I might have done major in the couple of different minors, maybe. It was all out of the Hannon book. Now, for the most part, if I teach scales, I'm going to not teach them from reading music. I'm going to use it. 3 fingers in one position, 5 fingers in the next position. And you work your way that way. Now, there are some people who do better, for me it's all befuddling, but who do better reading this repetitive thing in music and just, waiting to see what note they're supposed to play next, going up, playing the same scale, every octave going up. And so, okay, fine, I got that, and I figured that out this way. And then, right? Little things like that. And I didn't do them much, really. And I got away with not doing them much. And I did, try to pay some attention to figuring out my pieces. I wasn't a really dedicated practicer in terms of exactly what I was given to practice, because I was busy, learning this landscape, and he knew it, and he supported it, and he offered me the advice he could, but there really wasn't much advice he could offer. He didn't even, he would use the phrase diminish 7th chord, which he was trying to say probably diminished 7th chord, and he probably meant dominant 7th chord. But he wasn't teaching me. He just said, this thing, and he did whatever he did. But I do remember him saying that for him, if he were to improvise, the key to do it in would be like D flat. And that made sense, but not to me, because I wanted to play in C because it was easier. But as far as how it lays with your fingers, that does make sense. So, sticking with the idea now of technique, I had really no instruction in the physical mechanics of playing, right? And a lot of people who start piano lessons really get into the nuance of all of this and the motions and the wrist and this and that. And I really didn't. Uh, it was just kind of, you don't want to say I was beyond my teacher, but at a certain point I got there. But I didn't get another teacher, and, he was up in years and eventually actually passed away. And but I visited him in the hospital and he was sick. And he told me he'd never had a recital. I never had to do that. He was planning a recital, and he hoped he got out of the hospital to do it. And he was lying to everybody about how much I practiced, because he wanted to encourage people to practice more. I forget what he said. He told everybody I practiced 2 hours a day or something. Of course, I'm still a young kid. Was I at the piano that much and more? Sure. Was I doing what he assigned? No. But let's stay with that classical thread for a minute. So when I hang on just one second, I have to check one thing because I'm slightly befuddled. All right. There we go. So when I got to be a junior and then a senior in high school, and I didn't really have academic ambitions. I skated through high school. I could have done much better. I didn't. But I didn't try. I didn't do anything. But I got through. But I was expected to go to college, and music major. Okay, I mean that was the default, but that meant I had to audition as a classical pianist, and it's like, okay, so I'm probably at the beginning of my senior year in high school. I'm a few months before my audition for college. And my dad and I understand, okay, we got to get me a real teacher. At that point, Mr. Schmidt he had passed away years before. And I really didn't have instruction. I was playing all this stuff, but I was living there, which means my education was far from comprehensive. It was whatever I happened to experience, but I was appropriating it. So Mary Hinkle in Haddon Heights, New Jersey. My dad found her. I don't know how, but she was a real classical pianist. And we explained to her. We went to her house. We explained to her what we wanted to do. I really didn't have a lot of real instruction in the classical. And I'm going to be a piano major, and my audition's in a few months. And she looked at us and said, "You're nuts." She might have not said it like that, but she said, "You're nuts." But okay, leave your son here. Come back in an hour, or whatever. And then, we had that first lesson, and then, we're just talking afterward, and my dad says, "Well, don't worry about it. He's fine." Because she recognized that I was going to catch on, But I had my first exposure to a whole bunch of things then, like Bartok, like the Microcosmos, which oftentimes you start at book 1, and she started me at book 3, because I hadn't had any of that. And I think I auditioned for college on a Bach Convention and a Chopin Mazurka, and I never actually played the Chopin Mazurkas, and the Chopin that my teacher gave me was harder stuff that I really wasn't getting inside entirely because that background wasn't there, but I was playing it and it was okay. But it wasn't at the level it needed to be. So I had to go back and put foundations under myself, and it's funny, the Bach, first time I ever played Bach was there, and to some extent, or maybe to a large extent, I'm probably more drawn to that than almost anything. But it wasn't there. It wasn't part of where I was living, so I didn't experience it. And we went through a bunch of the two-part inversions, and because all of the sensibilities of that, there's certain sensibilities of playing Bach or Baroque music that I was not hip to whatsoever. I mean, it was a big It was a big cramming session, but she was really good because she recognized that I was able to sponge this. One, because I was gifted, I could do it, but I also had a pool I was swimming in. I was doing stuff. I was engaged. I just wasn't exposed to that, right, so much. And we went through some of the Bach conventions. The one that I auditioned for college. And it's still the case. And I go through periods I play that all the time. In fact, I want to have that completely memorized, because when in my next kind of version of a solo show that I put together, that's going to be a part of it with a little surprise at the end. But memorization, man, because my brain just takes it other places. Because even now, and especially now, I'm really learning about myself. And okay, so I'm 60, whatever I am, 60. What's this? 62, right? And it's still like I'm a kid, and it's like, man, not really. It's not productive to think this way, but still, I wish I were a kid again. I wish I could have this sense of whatever back then, but we're just still looking to grow, and we're just finding new things and all of that. So the first two-part invention. I'd get at least that far from memory, and I've been playing that over and over and over and over and over, with the idea that I'm going to internalize that, but memorization just doesn't work for me, And this is the practice to your strength, weaknesses, perform to your strength part of the equation, right there. So I'm still very engaged in classical music, but I got exposed to things, and I got my first exposure to technique, and then. This part I'm going to talk about sort of around the barn, just to not disparage anybody. When I went to college, the teacher I went to at the time Glassboro State. It's now Rowan University, and my teacher knew two of the three teachers on the piano faculty. Did not care for two of them. It's like, I really don't want you studying with this one, and I really, really don't want you studying with that one. We don't know this one, so request that one. I requested that one. Found out later he never got requested, and it was like this big deal. Somebody requested him, and there was a reason. There was a big reason, and that was a big part of why I dropped out after my freshman year. And I won't go into it beyond that. But also, I needed the attitude adjustment. I needed to be ready to do it. And I was doing it because I was expected to do it. But that was a very negative experience, and I really learned nothing positive. So that teacher doesn't count. Rest in peace and all that. I'm sure he was a nice man, and he meant well. And I did find out later kind of how that all happened. He had some sensibilities and some ideas that he just took to an extreme, right? And when I came back to college, when I was ready to learn, and I just did a blog entry about that, just a little bit about, the responsibility of learning. I caught up. I wasn't ready, at the time. I'd be in a really different place now if I were more mature when I was, 18, 19, 20. I wasn't. It's what it was, what it is. I can't change things, right? And so I go back, and I didn't request a teacher this time. I wasn't connected with anybody who knew anything, but I probably requested not to get my old teacher. I probably did that much. And as Providence would have it, or some would say as fate would have it, or serendipitously, or whatever. Veda Kaplinsky had come on faculty for 2 years, and she would be there for 2 years. And she was, in between colleges, and a close friend of hers was the department chair, and so she was brought in the faculty, and it was right when I came back, so she got all the new students, and oh my goodness, that was the real learning, and it was 2 years, and it was eventually devoted to Taubman technique or rotation technique, but I can go back, with the lessons I had, with Mr. Schmidt and Mary Hinkle and this person there and Veda Kaplinsky, and I feel like I have enough to interpret and navigate through. Now, when it comes to piano teaching, what I would do, because I came to recognize this, by the time I had gotten through college, hey, I'm really not a classical pianist. I'm an improviser, and this approach to playing and learning is not working for me, right? I can do it, but really my mind works otherwise. And it's really important to me, not that I teach beginners much at this point, or at all, not that I wouldn't, but that you find out where you are, like what kind of musician are you, and let's put you in an environment where you can absorb. Just imagine if what I was doing on my own, right, figuring out stuff. If I had a teacher doing that, it would have been a rocket ride, as opposed to riding on a snail through the desert, or whatever I was doing. But the good part about it is, when you're riding on a snail through the desert, you have all this opportunity to really examine the sand, and so I figured out things deeply, but there was a lot missing, right? So I could talk more about the classical side of the street. Let me stop there. Right? So, the improvisation side of the street got a giant boost when I was 14 years old and met the Mediri brothers. And many of you know that story, and how Joe Mediri plied me with, he just had this big stack of Benny Goodman albums, mostly Benny Goodman Trio, Teddy Wilson on piano, because I was doing that kind of stuff, because I had done that in my piano lessons, right? And I could, No, I didn't put the chicken dance in there. Huh. And so that was basically Strad piano, and he no, but yeah. And so the Fats Waller, I took to that, and then I was off to the races, because I was really engaged with it. But the learning was completely opposite of how you learn classical music from the page, and it wasn't structured. And I was listening, and listening and listening and listening. And one example would be Fats Waller, right? And so, now, one thing is, the fidelity of records in the 30s and 40s and even the 20s, going back that far, was not so great. So you didn't always hear everything right away. But also, my ear wasn't all that developed. But I remember figuring out, wait a minute, what's he doing? And I figured out he's playing a 10th there, and it's like, oh my goodness. Now, I don't know if you can see my hand, but I actually do not cleanly reach this 10th. My E flat here, G here. My little finger just clips the edge here, and my thumb wraps around just enough of the F to get to the G, but the F is partly going down, but not enough to sound, but almost like that. I almost roll it, but I can get away with that rolling. I barely make it. And I'm like, oh my goodness, he's doing that. Now, I don't know if you can see the difference. And if you're the person who commented on a recent YouTube video about, I see you can play tension with a big hand, and I commented back that actually, no, but I did this all day on my desk in school, right? In order to be able, and I cannot do it with my right hand, right? In order to be able to draw a straight line here without cupping my wrist, without doing this, in order to make it happen, right? And then I got to the point where I could make the big ones. Then the two white key ones, the two black key ones. That's tough. It's better. Okay? But I could make them all, and it's like, okay. And it took me quite a while later to like, wait a minute, what am I hearing in that record? Wait a minute, he's playing a third note in there. And these little discoveries were like months apart. Imagine if I had a teacher. Right? So, some of you are very observant and, see me walk tense. Now, did I do like structured exercises about walking tense? No, I probably made up some of my own exercises, from time to time. But that's an important piece of the classical thing that I'm glad I remembered. So Veda Kaplinski, when working rotation technique, and that's a whole other story. And we did it in a kind of special dispensation in college where in that realm it's really not supposed to happen, but the tendonitis thing was starting, and so we devoted a lot of time to that, and it's all scale work, and it's all very nuanced movements. And so her approach was no technical exercises, none of the turning, none of the hand, and none of that. You just practice scales, and it wasn't necessarily the comprehensive every scale known to man, just scale passages. And most of the scales I play are major scales. I poke in other directions, but that was a dominant scale. I lied, but that too. So scales, and then because you're always working out classical pieces, and you have these difficult things, and you develop exercises from those challenging passages. Right? And that's it. That's the extent of technical exercises. And I was sort of there anyway, so it was easy for me to grasp that. And from that point on, no student ever got an exercise book from me, except the Hand Book 2, oftentimes, because all those major and relative minor scales and 4 octaves are written there, right? So that was my technique practice and instruction on that side of the street. And that's related to, in a way, how I work this out. So I will go in little spurts when I'm playing a stride thing. Well, let me play Coquette and see. All right, and I don't think about it this way because I'm not, an advanced harmonic guy, advanced in the modern jazz sensibilities. But then every once in a while, somebody will comment that he's harmonically fearless. In the classic jazz sense, I am, doing more than's often done harmonically there. But what it really is the melodic movement idea, right? And if there's something that distinguishes me or allows me to make my own statement in that realm, it's that there's all this kind of freedom. And then when I started playing out and playing with other musicians, when like a more contemporary player would play, right away, the first comment I would get was voice leading, man. I like your voice leading because like basically the melodic movement of the chords. Because when you start getting into the big sounds of and that, I don't want to say attention to detail, but even the ability, the priority shifts out of necessity to some extent. And man, so we talk about sensibilities. So all of these things that I'm talking about inform my sensibilities that I carry with me. They're deeply ingrained. I've been living there all my life, right? Do I have the formal study to the depth that most people with my experience and to some extent diversity have? No. But do I have real experiences, real study, and just a whole lot of living there and absorbing and being there, and of course playing full time all my life and being in all those situations? Absolutely, right? And that, it's an incomplete picture. It doesn't have the depth that it could have if some circumstances were different, including my own maturity level. But when I was younger in particular, but it all is what it is, right? Now, those of you who are into strand piano recognize the walking tense. But what I'm where I'm maybe taking it further is I'm hearing them. I'm adding sort of that because I'm engaged. I'm listening to this. Because at a certain point, when you go deep enough into that listening absorption, you're in this other state in here, right? And then you're able to be in that feeling expressive place, where the music is moving you. You listen to music and it moves you to tears, or it takes you someplace, and that's why we listen to music. But what if you're playing music and that's happening to you? That's the magic. But in order for that to happen, you have to be able to be absorbed in the music and not, what's that note again? What's that thing? No. So, however you get there, whether you practice reading a passage, let's say I take this exercise, and I practice it 557 times a day for 3 weeks, and then I practice it 667 times a day for 3 more weeks in all the other keys, right? And now, for me, that would not work. I don't have the attention span for that. I get 3 times through, and I'm like, what's for dinner? And that, which I've learned that if I think about what's for dinner and play, I get deeper because I play out of my peripheral vision. And let me write that down because that's been a big theme lately. Play from peripheral vision. I hope I can read this. However it's spelled, right? But however it gets programmed in, right? Whatever that is for you, then you can be in that place where aren't piecing anything together. You're just expressing. You're just emoting. You're not thinking about at all what you're doing because you've done it so many times. However you practice it, it doesn't matter because we're all different. We absorb it the way we absorb it. Now, I should say this because I'm going to run out of time. And I'm kind of happy I'm getting everything in, even if it's a little disjointed. So let's talk about jazz studies. And what made me think about that was the one jazz teacher I had for 3 years would use the word learning styles and recognize that people have different learning styles. I would use the term temperament, and I would jump off of that. When I went to college, there was no jazz major. This was in the mid-'70s, late '70s when I started. Late '70s. And I think there were some jazz majors by then, but it wasn't widespread, and at my college it wasn't. I'm glad. I'm much better off having been a classical piano major for all the experiences that I had and what I learned from that. But there was an adjunct jazz guy, Gerald Price from Philadelphia. And I wound up, maybe I was 19, 20 years old, I think after I dropped out, for a couple of years. I went to his house, took one lesson from him. One lesson in his house. And he gave me the concept of the 2-5, the 2-5-1. Right? In the key of C, D minor 7, G 7, C. Now, I had figured out my own 1-4-5 and all that stuff, right? But the harmonic arrangement of 2-5-1 is kind of unique to the classic era of jazz and the Great American Songbook in particular, right? And you really take that to a deep level. So that 1 hour lesson, now I'm going to speak for a minute, just for musicians. F minor 7, B flat 7, the E flat, F minor 7, B flat 7, 2-5. But then he would give me, let me see, F sharp minor 7, like a chromatic 2-5. And I remember arguing with him. It's like, but the F sharp minor 7, that's nice, but that doesn't fit the melodies. Now don't worry about it. Okay, but I wound up worrying about it, not worrying about it, but incorporating it. And he gave me that, and he gave me the instruction, and then I had a good 2 years, or a year and a half, of just working out all sorts of things at home, based on that one lesson and that one, that window he gave me, right? Because I remember, coming to him and saying, well, I'll tell you the story. I was not going to. I go to his house, and there were just some circumstances that were very intimidating. All right? Starting with that he had an angry, nasty pit bull in his yard. And he was an intimidating guy, big guy. And he forgot he scheduled a lesson, and he sees me out in his front, standing outside his gate. What do you want? With it you don't belong in my neighborhood. Why are you here? And then I meekly told him I had this lesson, and then right. Then he come in, he dismissed the bass player to his basement that he was playing with, and then said play. And I played whatever I played. I was just and then he just said, "What do you want from me?" This is not going well. So apparently, what I played for him showed him I could get around, but then I explained to him, I have no idea what's going on here, and I know there are all these other things I don't hear, and I don't feel really equipped to even begin to call myself a jazz musician. I need, and then he's like, oh, okay, fine, and then he just went on this tear with this one concept, the 2-5-1, and we played as time goes by. The whole lesson was just on that. All this crazy reharm of that. But, that was just a great window in. And, for someone who was used to like hearing something on a recording and then sort of figuring it out, to give me like a whole plate of, meat and potatoes of this stuff, as opposed to fishing out the ramen noodles, that had done all the time before, was great. But there came a point, a few years later, and I don't know if I was actually finished, because I did my college, once I went back, part time, and then, it took me a while. But I just went ahead and I found a more contemporary jazz teacher who did, went to Atlantic City to hear him play, and he's in all the stuff that I don't understand. So that's good, And then, so I learned, the contemporary approach to playing jazz piano, and learned that I can't do it. Can't do it. Because I already have sensibilities programmed in. He eventually understood that. Like the chord scale thing. You learn particular scales, altered notes and stuff over certain chords, and then you improvise with that. And I remember trying to do that with a 2/5 and the scale and thing. And it's all just like, thinking mechanically and when I throw all that away, I kind of know where to go. And I know more deeply where to go now, because of all the experiences, including trying to do what he suggested and still trying to practice some of those things, for sure. So every experience that I had, formal or informal, is a success or failure, is an important part of who I am now, right? But then when you look all over that, the most important, but although that one lesson with Gerald Price was very consequential, my short few months with Mary Hinkle was very consequential. But you could say, the two kind of marquee teachers, Don Glandon on the jazz side and Veda Kaplinsky on the classical side, 2 years with one, 3, well maybe more than 2 years with Veda Kaplinsky. I did go to her house a few times. Well, let's say 2 years here, 3 years here. Different time periods. Not super extensive. Other things before. It was not a systematic program from front to back, but it was all of these experiences that were forming my sensibilities as well as guided by my sensibilities. So I'm hoping that you can take something from that, right? Because one of the things that inevitably comes up in the learning, dynamic is, how do I practice? How do I structure my practice? And it really is going to have to do with your sensibilities, with your temperament, with, as Don Glandon would say, your learning style. You get to know yourself. The more you know yourself, the more effective you're going to be at targeting yourself. Well, that didn't sound right, but you know what I mean. At strategizing for yourself. So, I went stream of consciousness, and let's just see if there's anything that, I didn't play by. I kind of hit all of this. But this is interesting. Where I'm always into evolving and growing, and I wrote here, I didn't follow the trend to more contemporary jazz that people my age did, but neither did I get stuck where I was. Right. And we're all products of our culture. And this is, I guess, the one other thing. Two things. We're products of our culture, and our contemporary culture for many years, rock and roll, to now, is a straight eighth culture. Right? It's not a. Swing feel, but my sensibility is a swing sensibility. Most people my age, and especially younger, if they swing, it's not really satisfying. It's not where they live, and that's where I live. So I try to pay more attention. I had my mainstay Monday, my first Friday mainstay show last week, and did a lot of instrumental R&B, smooth jazz, all straight eighth, references and stuff. You can look at the live stream on the Mainstay YouTube channel. Right now, there's a problem with the Mainstay YouTube channel, and you have to kind of search for an individual video. It might not be sitting there, but you put Joel Holt First Friday on the Mainstay live streams YouTube channel, you'll find my shows. And I seem to live there more. I got through it. I can do it. I can live places, but there's always going to be this deficit or this gap. Just like there's always going to be a deficit in the technical ability of my left hand compared to my right. Right? I'm absolutely right-handed. I can play my scales cleaner at a significantly faster tempo than I can with my left hand. And I accepted that a long time ago. That I'm not like letting my right hand be stagnant to bring my left hand up to it. It's just like, you just make it work. And you've heard me say this before too. You know where your box is. You know what you've got. You know your vocabulary. And then when you've got to, stand in the ring and deliver, you stay within your boundaries. You don't throw spaghetti against the wall in performance. You can throw spaghetti against the wall in practicing. Practicing is when it gets, messy and ridiculous like that. That's practicing. That's not performance. And speaking about ridiculous statements, when someone says, "Oh, Joe Holt can play anything," that is ludicrous. But what Joe Holt typically doesn't do is display that in performance, because he doesn't attempt to do things he doesn't do. Wait a minute, I need to talk about me in terms of me. I don't, and so, pretty much everything that I do in performance, I to some extent pull off reasonably, hopefully, and it gives an illusion because I can go different places, but like don't expect me to sight read Sondheim or keep Sondheim straight at all. See, I just let that cat out of the bag, but you're never going to see me do that. There's a story about that. Sondheim story. A little story, but it's important. And so the very last thing, because of the classical sensibilities, the significant exposure I've had to it, and I'll listen to classical music. My go-to in the car, historically, I'm trying to change that just to make myself listen to other things, is either the jazz station or the classical station, right? So that ability to express through the piano. One thing I really appreciate is just a well-played piece of music. Express, the control, and for the most part, the pianists that I really enjoy listening to are those who have that control. Oscar Peterson, deeply classically rooted, right? Keith Jarrett, I'll listen to some of the stuff he does, whether it's the freer out stuff, or the Somewhere Over the Rainbow encores he'll do at the end of his solo concerts, and it's just some of the most beautifully played piano. And that's super important to me, to be able to express through your instrument. So it's not just about like jazz licks or riffs or whatever. It's you say something, and this is where I gotta get the ego in check. It doesn't have to be complicated to be profound. It just has to be from here. A clear channel. And it can be just a single line of notes. And it doesn't have to be impressive, right? And of course, I just played, a piece of If I Had You, which isn't necessarily profound in this context. But I think you know what I mean. And you just be in control, and you play it from here, and you don't throw spaghetti against the wall. There's so many things I could talk about. Performance versus practicing and all of that. But hopefully I scratched the itch a little bit of, anyone who tell me more about your background. There, I kind of did it. There's a lot of things I've talked about, but I did it all in one place. But I hope you got something out of this too, just in terms of, let your heart guide you, and Allow your sensibilities to ground what you do and be yourself in the process. So there, for what it's worth, right? Thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow night for Piano for My Friends.